Hello, welcome back. This is Ms. Ponce de Leon. Today we're going to cover page 4 of our notes packet. So if you don't have a copy of this, press pause and print this page. If you don't have access to a printer, if you will just take a blank sheet of paper and write down these notes on a blank sheet of paper. So we're going to start with, again, page 4. You may recall that we did our page 2 and 3 notes yesterday. So solving one-step equations and also using inverse operations. So if you have those notes out, if you'll please just place them aside because we'll be referring back to some of that vocabulary. Just so that we keep solidifying our knowledge on that vocabulary. So we're starting with page 4. If you will look at the top of page 4, we've got a couple of little notes here to help us. Looking at this, we've got steps to solve two-step equations. So the first step is we will use addition or subtraction to remove the constant. Okay, so write down constant there. Okay, you may want to refer back to page 2 of our notes. Okay, a constant is a number on its own or fixed value. Okay, so keep that in mind. Our second step is we're going to use multiplication or division to remove the coefficient. So coefficient. Oops, let me spell that right. C-O-E-F-F-I-C-I-E-N-T. Sorry about that. Coefficient. And that's a C right there. Okay. So again, referencing our page 2 notes, a coefficient is a numerical or constant quantity placed before and multiplying the variable in an algebraic expression. Okay, so it is the number in front of a variable. Okay, little helpful tip right here. If dividing by a fraction, you multiply by the, and this word is reciprocal, R-E-C. Sorry, I like to spell out loud. Apologize on that. Okay, multiply by the reciprocal. We multiply by the reciprocal yesterday. If you look at your page 3 notes, if you look at question number 3, and even question number 4, in order to solve for a variable, if you've got that fraction in front of it, to solve for the variable, you multiply that by the reciprocal. So in this case, if you take a look at question number 3 from yesterday's page 3 notes, the number in front of the variable was a negative 3/4. Okay, the reciprocal of that would be a negative 4/3. Okay, and that will help when you multiply the reciprocal, your numerator and your denominator cancel out, and then your of each of these. So if I multiply the reciprocal, that 4 cancels out with that 4, that 3 cancels out with that 3, and then a negative times a negative becomes a positive. So that becomes positive 1. Okay, so just some helpful notes there. Now let's take that knowledge and apply it to some of this work that we're doing here. Let's take a look at question number 1. Okay, we are going to use our steps to solve this two-step equation. Our first step is to use addition or subtraction to remove the constant. And if you guys remember, the constant is just a number by itself. So in question number 1, the constant here is positive 8. So to get rid of or to undo positive 8, okay, we will use the inverse operation of plus, which is a subtraction, and we will subtract 8 to both sides to balance that equation. So now on my left side of the equation, I've got 6x plus 8 minus 8, so I'm left with 6x. Now on my right side, 50 minus 8 is 42. Okay. Now we take our second step. We use multiplication or division to remove the coefficient. And if you reference back to your notes on page 2, the coefficient is the number that is in front of the variable. So I'm going to use my inverse operations of multiplication. So if I have 6 times x, I'm going to divide, okay, inverse operation of multiplication is division. So divide by 6. What I do to one side of an equation, I have to do the other side to balance. Okay, so now I'm left with x equals 42 divided by 6 is 7. And that is your answer there. If you need to stop, rewind, and go over this again, please do so. Otherwise, we will move on to the next problem. Okay, so taking a look here at question number 2. Again, looking at our steps, our first step is to remove the constant by using the inverse operation. Okay? In this case, I have a minus 5, so the inverse of minus 5 is plus 5. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. My minus 5 and my plus 5 cancel out, so on my left side of the equation, I'm left with 2x equals, on my right side, 11 plus 5 is 16. Now step 2, I use multiplication or division to remove the coefficient. Again, the coefficient is the number in front of the variable. If I have 2 times x, my inverse operation is division. So I divide both sides, and I'm left with x equals 16 divided by 2, which is 8. Okay, pause and rewind if you need to. Otherwise, we will be moving on to question number 3. And question number 3, same steps. In this case, my constant is in a different order than what we saw in question 1 and 2, but it's not a big deal. That 7 is a plus 7, so we get rid of the constant first by using addition or subtraction. So we've got minus 7, minus 7. I'm now left with negative 3x equals 34 minus 7 is that 27? Yes, 27. I'm just doing that in my head, but I'm going to check myself just to make sure. 34 minus 7. Yes, that's 27. Okay, so now I've got negative 3 times x using my multiplication inverse operation. That's divide by negative 3, divide by negative 3. So now x equals 27 divided by negative 3 is negative 9. Okay. If you need to pause and rewind, do so. Otherwise, we will go on to question number 4. Taking a look at our steps again. Use addition or subtraction to remove the constant. In this case, our constant is at plus 9, so we minus 9, minus 9. I'm left with negative 4x equals 13 minus 9 is 4. Now, use multiplication or division inverse to remove the coefficient. So I divide by negative 4, divide by negative 4. You always, whatever we do to one side of the equation, we have to do the other side to balance. So now this is x equals 4 divided by negative 4 is negative 1. Okay. There you go. Let's take a look at question number 5 now. Okay. This one looks a little bit intimidating because we have a fraction, but just remember, follow our steps. First step, get rid of the constant. So I have a plus 22. My inverse for addition is subtraction. Subtract 22, balance my equation. I now have 3 over 5x equals 28 minus 22 is 6. Okay. Now this is where we can use our tip if we have a fraction. Okay? If to get rid of a fraction in front of a variable, we multiply by the reciprocal. Okay? We could multiply by 5 and then divide by 3. We're going to do a couple steps, but the easiest way is to include that in one step. And I'm going to put that in red so that we see this. Okay? The reciprocal of 3 over 5 is 5 over 3. Okay, we just flip the numerator and the denominator. Okay, and now we had the original 3/5 x equals 6. Okay, and now remember, whatever we do to one side of the equation, we do to the other. So now I'm going to multiply this side by 5 over 3. Okay, now let's look at that. When I multiply by the reciprocal, my 5's cancel, my 3's cancel, I'm left with x equals. Over here, I'm going to make this 6 over 1, just so that you see that that number 6 is actually a fraction if we put it 6 over 1. Now, our multiplication rule for fractions is we multiply straight across the top, straight across the bottom. So now I have 6 times 5, that's a 5, over 1 times 3. That is equal to 30 over 3. And now if I reduce that down, x equals to 10. Okay, a little bit more complicated because we're dealing with a fraction, but nothing we can't do. Okay, just remember, if you have a fraction multiplied by a variable, the easiest way to get rid of it is to multiply that fraction by its reciprocal. Okay, now let's move over to question number 6. We're almost done. Okay, this is another way you can see a fraction. You can either have it 3/5 times x, or you can have x over 2. Let's take a look at this one. Again, first step, get rid of that constant by using the inverse operations. If I have a -7, to get rid of that constant, I do a +7 on both sides. Okay, so now I'm left with x over 2 equals 9 plus 7 is 16. Okay, now this x over 2, I'm going to show you, x over 2 is really just 1/2 x. So let's look at this two ways. I'm going to bring this x over 2 over here. And students, there's a couple different ways we can look at this, and just whichever way you feel more comfortable with, you can stick with that method. Okay, x over 2 is the same thing as dividing something by 2 is the same thing as multiplying it by 1/2. Okay, so this can also be written 1/2 of x. Okay, now getting rid of that fraction, we know that we can multiply by the reciprocal. So one way of doing this is saying, okay, the reciprocal 1 over 2 is 2 over 1. Okay, and then what I'll do there is say, okay, this is my original 1 over 2x equals 16. And then now again, whatever I do to one side, I do to the other side, so 2 over 1. Okay, so now my 2's cancel, my 1's cancel, I'm left with x on the left side, and then 16 over 1 times 2 over 1, that is 32 over 1. I'm just going to simplify that to 32. Okay, that's one way you can do it. Okay, another way, which might be a little bit easier for you guys when you see it this way, is to looking at x over 2, this is x divided by 2. So my inverse operation is whatever I divide, the inverse is multiply. So I can also say, if I'm dividing by 2 to solve for that x, I can multiply both sides by 2. And then I've got the 16 times 2. Now my 2's cancel, and I'm left with x equals 32. Okay, this may be a simpler way for you to look at it. When you have x over 2, it may be a little bit simpler for you to just multiply by 2 versus when you actually have a fraction over here where you have a numerator and a denominator where we multiply by the reciprocal. Okay, that covers today's notes, page 4, solving two-step equations. If you have any questions, please email me or ask me in class so we can figure out how to get you some help. Have a great day. Thank you.